The conference room fell silent as Daniel Carter stood before the floor-to-ceiling windows of his downtown office, staring at the city lights below. His phone buzzed for the third time in 10 minutes. Another email from the Nanny agency. Another candidate who'd seemed perfect on paper but had quit after just 2 weeks. He rubbed his tired eyes and loosened his tie. At 38 years old, Daniel had built an empire. His tech company was worth over $1 billion. His face had been on magazine covers and people called him a genius. But none of that mattered when he came home each night to find his 7-year-old son sitting alone with yet another stranger who looked at the boy like he was a problem to be solved rather than a child to be loved. His son Tommy had cerebral palsy. The doctors had explained it all when Tommy was born. The motor difficulties, the speech challenges, the need for constant care and therapy. Daniel had listened to every word, read every book, and promised himself he'd be the father Tommy deserved. But then his wife left. He still remembered that day 3 years ago. She'd packed her bags while Tommy was sleeping, and she'd said the words that still haunted him. "I didn't sign up for this. I can't do it anymore." Just like that, she was gone. No forwarding address. No phone calls. She'd simply disappeared from their lives as if their son's condition had given her permission to abandon her own child. Daniel had tried to do it all himself at first. He'd rearranged his schedule, worked from home, hired the best therapists money could buy. But running a company meant travel, meant late-night calls with investors in different time zones, meant making decisions that affected thousands of employees. He couldn't be in 2 places at once, and Tommy needed consistency. He needed someone who would be there every single day. So began the parade of nannies. The first one had excellent references and 20 years of experience. She lasted 3 months before telling Daniel that Tommy was too much work for what he was paying her. He'd doubled the salary. She still left. The second nanny seemed nice enough. She smiled a lot and said all the right things during the interview. But Daniel came home early one day and found Tommy sitting in his wheelchair in front of the television, still in his pajamas at 3 in the afternoon. The nanny was on her phone, barely looking up. She was gone that same day. Then came the one who treated Tommy like he was fragile glass that might shatter at any moment. She wouldn't let him try anything on his own, wouldn't let him struggle or learn. Daniel had watched his son's frustration grow until Tommy stopped trying altogether. That one didn't last long either. After her came the nanny who spent more time taking selfies in his expensive house than actually caring for Tommy. Then the one who kept hinting about needing advances on her salary. Then the one who seemed perfect until Daniel discovered she was selling stories about his family to tabloid websites. Each failure had taken a piece of Daniel's hope with it. Each new nanny meant explaining Tommy's needs all over again, watching his son's face as another stranger walked through the door, seeing that little flicker of hope in Tommy's eyes slowly die when they inevitably left. Daniel had built walls around his heart after his wife abandoned them. He'd learned not to trust easily, not to hope for too much. He provided the best medical care, the best equipment, the best therapists. He made sure Tommy had everything money could buy. But he'd stopped believing that anyone would truly care about his son the way a parent should. His assistant knocked on the office door, pulling him from his thoughts. "Mr. Carter," the agency called. "They have one more candidate for you to interview. She's waiting downstairs if you have time." Daniel glanced at his watch. It was almost 7 in the evening. Tommy would be having dinner soon with the temporary caregiver, probably sitting in silence while she scrolled through her phone. The thought made his chest tight. "Send her up," he said quietly. 5 minutes later, a young woman walked into his office. She wasn't what he expected. Most of the previous nannies had worn professional outfits and carried expensive handbags, clearly trying to impress him. This woman wore simple jeans and a comfortable sweater. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and she carried a worn backpack instead of a designer purse. "Mr. Carter, I'm Lisa Hayes." She shook his hand with a firm, confident grip. Her eyes were warm but direct, meeting his gaze without the artificial sweetness he'd grown to distrust. "Please, sit down." Daniel gestured to the chair across from his desk and pulled out the file the agency had sent. "I see you worked as a pediatric nurse for 6 years before transitioning to private care." "That's right. I loved working at the hospital, but I realized I wanted to make a deeper impact. In a hospital, you see kids for a few days or weeks and then they're gone. I wanted to be part of someone's daily life, to really help them grow and develop. Daniel had heard similar speeches before. He kept his expression neutral. The agency told you about my son's condition? They mentioned he has cerebral palsy and needs full-time care. But I'd rather hear about him from you, if that's okay. Lisa leaned forward slightly. What's he like? Not his medical diagnosis, who is he as a person? The question caught Daniel off guard. No one had ever asked him that before. They'd all wanted to know about Tommy's limitations, his medications, his therapy schedule. No one had asked about Tommy himself. Daniel paused, surprised to find his throat tight. He's smart. Really smart. He loves space and planets. He can tell you everything about the solar system. He's got this laugh that just lights up a room, though we don't hear it as much these days. And he tries so hard even when things are difficult for him. He never complains. Lisa smiled, and it reached her eyes in a way that seemed genuine. He sounds wonderful. How does he communicate? Does he use any assistive devices? They talked for over an hour. Daniel found himself sharing things he hadn't planned to. How Tommy got frustrated when people treated him differently. How he loved building blocks even though his hands didn't always cooperate. How he'd stopped being excited when new nannies arrived because he expected them to leave. Lisa listened without interrupting, asking thoughtful questions that showed she was actually paying attention. When Daniel mentioned Tommy's physical therapy sessions, she didn't look overwhelmed. When he explained the feeding difficulties, she nodded with understanding rather than concern. Can I be honest with you, Mr. Carter? Lisa said finally. I've read your son's medical file. I know what the challenges are. But I don't see challenges when I work with kids like Tommy. I see potential. I see a little boy who needs someone to believe in him and help him believe in himself. That's what I want to do. Daniel wanted to believe her. He really did. But he'd been disappointed too many times. The last 6 nannies all said similar things. They all left within a few months. Then they weren't the right fit. Lisa's voice was calm but firm. I'm not going to promise I'm perfect or that this will be easy, but I can promise that if I take this job, I'm committed. I don't quit on kids, ever. There was something in her tone that made Daniel pause. It wasn't arrogance or empty confidence. It was simply a statement of fact, delivered with quiet certainty. I'll need to do a background check, he said, and I'll want to call your references personally. Of course. I expected that. Lisa pulled out a folder from her backpack. Here are letters from 3 families I've worked with, plus contact information for my former supervisor at the hospital. Call them all. Ask them anything you want. Daniel spent the next 2 days making those calls. Every single person had glowing things to say about Lisa. The hospital supervisor called her the most dedicated nurse I've ever worked with. One family told him their daughter still talked about Miss Lisa years after she'd moved on. Another family said she'd helped their son make progress they'd been told was impossible. Still, Daniel hesitated. The hurt of past betrayals ran deep, but when he looked at Tommy, at the sadness in his son's eyes, at the way the boy barely reacted anymore when another temporary caregiver showed up, Daniel knew he had to try again. He called Lisa and offered her the position. She could start on Monday. That weekend, Daniel did something he'd never done before. He had a security company install additional cameras throughout the house. He told himself it was for Tommy's safety, that any responsible parent would want to monitor their child's care. But deep down he knew it was about trust, or his lack of it. He needed to see what happened when he wasn't home. He needed proof that this time would be different. Monday morning arrived too quickly. Daniel had barely slept. He'd prepared detailed notes about Tommy's routine, his medications, his therapy schedule. He'd laid out emergency contacts and important phone numbers. He'd probably overdone it, but he couldn't help himself. Lisa arrived at exactly 8 o'clock as promised. She wasn't wearing fancy clothes or trying to impress. She had that same practical outfit and warm smile. Tommy was sitting in his wheelchair in the living room, watching cartoons with that blank expression Daniel had grown to hate. It was the look of a child who'd learned not to hope for much. Tommy, this is Miss Lisa. She's going to be spending time with you while I'm at work. Daniel kept his voice upbeat, but he could see his son barely registered the introduction. Lisa didn't seem bothered by Tommy's lack of enthusiasm. She simply walked over, crouched down to his eye level, and smiled. Hey, Tommy, your dad tells me you're basically an expert on space. That's so cool. I have to be honest, I barely know anything about planets. Think you could teach me sometime? Tommy glanced at her. a flicker of interest crossing his face before the shutters came back down. He'd been hurt too many times by adults who said nice things and then left. Daniel felt that familiar ache in his chest. He wanted to stay, to protect his son from another potential disappointment. But he had meetings he couldn't cancel, decisions that couldn't wait. "I'll be home by 6, he told Lisa, handing her his business card with all his contact numbers highlighted. "Call me if you need anything." "Anything at all." "We'll be fine," Lisa said confidently. "Won't we, Tommy?" As Daniel walked to his car, he pulled out his phone and opened the security camera app. He'd just check once, he told himself, just to make sure everything was okay. On the screen, he could see Lisa settling onto the couch next to Tommy's wheelchair. She wasn't looking at her phone or turning up the TV volume. She was simply sitting there, present and patient, like she had all the time in the world. Daniel sat in his car for another moment, watching. Then he forced himself to put the phone away and drive to the office. He had to at least give this a chance, for Tommy's sake, even if it meant risking another heartbreak. The day dragged on endlessly. During every meeting, every phone call, every decision, part of Daniel's mind was back home with his son. He checked his phone obsessively, waiting for Lisa to call with a problem or an excuse. But the phone stayed silent. By lunchtime, his curiosity got the better of him. He opened the security app again, telling himself he'd just take a quick look. What he saw made him stare at the screen in disbelief. And for the first time in 3 years, Daniel felt something that terrified him more than disappointment ever could. He felt hope. Daniel's hand trembled slightly as he held his phone, staring at the security camera feed. He'd stepped out of his board meeting, mumbling something about an urgent family matter. His colleagues had given him concerned looks, but he didn't care. What he was seeing on that screen was more important than any business deal. There, in his living room, Lisa had transformed lunch into something magical. Tommy sat at the table, his special adaptive utensils laid out in front of him. But this wasn't like the usual mealtimes Daniel had witnessed through the cameras with previous nannies. Those had been quiet, awkward affairs where caregivers would sometimes just feed Tommy themselves because it was faster and easier. Lisa had turned the spoon into a spaceship. "Mission control to Captain Tommy," she was saying, her voice full of excitement. "We have incoming vegetables approaching the space station. Can you guide them in for a safe landing?" Tommy's eyes were bright with interest. He gripped the spoon with concentration, his hand shaking slightly as it always did. The piece of carrot wobbled dangerously. "Steady, Captain," Lisa encouraged. "You've got this. Just a little more to the left." Perfect trajectory. The carrot made it to Tommy's mouth. He chewed and swallowed, and then something happened that made Daniel's breath catch in his throat. Tommy laughed. Not a polite chuckle or a small smile. A real, genuine, delighted laugh that crinkled his eyes and lit up his whole face. It was the sound Daniel had almost forgotten, the sound that had been missing from their home for so long. "Excellent landing, Captain," Lisa cheered, holding up her hand for a high five. Tommy slapped her palm with his own shaky hand, grinning from ear to ear. "Ready for the next mission? I hear there's some chicken approaching from the outer atmosphere." Daniel watched the entire lunch unfold. Every bite was a new adventure. Every small success was celebrated like a major victory. And Tommy wasn't just eating. He was participating, trying, engaging in a way Daniel hadn't seen in months. When lunch was over, Lisa didn't just turn on the TV and walk away like others had done. She moved Tommy to the floor mat where they did his physical therapy exercises, but again she'd made it into something fun. "Okay, Space Cadet, time for astronaut training," she announced. "You know astronauts have to be really strong to handle zero gravity, right? Let's work on those arm muscles." She guided Tommy through his stretches, the same ones the physical therapist came to do 3 times a week. But where the therapist was clinical and matter-of-fact, Lisa made it feel like a game. She counted with him, encouraged him when he struggled, and never once showed frustration when he needed to rest. Daniel found himself unable to look away from the screen. He sat in his car in the parking garage, completely absorbed. He should have been back in that meeting. There were millions of dollars on the line, contracts to negotiate, decisions to make. But none of it seemed to matter compared to what he was witnessing. Over the next few days, Daniel developed a new routine. He'd check the cameras during his lunch break, telling himself it was just responsible monitoring. But the truth was, he couldn't help himself. Each time he looked, he discovered something new. On Tuesday, he watched Lisa reading to Tommy. But she wasn't just reading the words on the page. She did different voices for every character. Silly voices that made Tommy giggle, dramatic voices that made him lean forward with anticipation. When Tommy tried to say some of the words along with her, stumbling over the pronunciation, Lisa patiently helped him sound them out without making him feel bad about his speech difficulties. On Wednesday, Daniel saw them working on a puzzle together. Tommy's fine motor skills made puzzles challenging, but Lisa had figured out a system. She'd hold two pieces near each other and Tommy would tell her which way to move them until they fit. She never grabbed the pieces and did it herself even when it took much longer. She let Tommy be in control, guiding her hands with his words. Thursday brought something that made Daniel's chest tighten with emotion. He'd checked the camera during an afternoon conference call, keeping his phone in his lap while pretending to pay attention to quarterly projections. On the screen, he saw Tommy having a difficult moment. His hand had knocked over a cup of juice and the boy looked devastated, like he expected to be scolded or have someone sigh with frustration. Lisa simply grabbed a towel and started cleaning it up. "Happens to everyone," she said casually. "You know, I knocked over an entire pot of soup once when I was cooking. Made a way bigger mess than this. At least your juice didn't splatter on the ceiling." Tommy watched her warily, still waiting for the disappointment he'd learned to expect from adults. "Hey," Lisa said softly, meeting his eyes. "Accidents happen. It's no big deal. Want to help me clean up? You can hold the towel while I wipe." She placed the towel in Tommy's lap and together they cleaned the spill. By the end, Tommy was smiling again, the moment of distress forgotten. Daniel felt his eyes sting with unexpected tears. Such a small thing, really. A spilled cup of juice. But the way Lisa had handled it, turning a potential upset into a shared task, making Tommy feel capable instead of clumsy, it was exactly what his son needed. That evening, Daniel came home earlier than usual. He told himself it was because he'd finished his work, but really he wanted to see Lisa and Tommy together in person, not just through a screen. He found them in the living room, surrounded by pillows and blankets. At first, Daniel thought they'd made a mess, but as he looked closer, he realized they'd built something, a fort of some kind constructed around Tommy's wheelchair. "Dad." Tommy's face lit up when he saw his father. "Look, we made a spaceship." Daniel blinked in surprise. Tommy hadn't greeted him with that much enthusiasm in a long time. The boy was usually tired by the evening, withdrawn and quiet. "It's pretty amazing," Lisa said, emerging from behind a blanket draped over two chairs. "Tommy designed it himself. He told me exactly where every pillow should go. I was just the construction crew. It has a cockpit and everything," Tommy said proudly, his words slightly slurred but clear enough. "Want to see inside?" Daniel felt a lump in his throat. "I'd love to." He got down on his hands and knees, something he couldn't remember doing in their expensive, pristinely decorated living room, and crawled into the fort. Lisa had arranged it perfectly. There was enough space for Tommy's wheelchair to fit comfortably inside, with pillows positioned to support him. A small flashlight hung from the ceiling like a lantern, and Tommy's space books were stacked carefully in one corner. "This is incredible, buddy," Daniel said, his voice rough with emotion. Tommy beamed. "Miss Lisa said we could keep it up until bedtime." "Can we, Dad, please?" Daniel looked at Lisa, who shrugged with a small smile. "It's structured well enough that it won't fall on him, and everything can be put away in about 5 minutes when he's ready for bed." "Then absolutely," Daniel said. "The spaceship can stay." After Tommy was settled in bed that night, Daniel found Lisa in the kitchen washing the dinner dishes. He'd offered to have a cleaning service come daily, but she'd waved it off, saying she didn't mind doing small tasks like this. "Can I talk to you for a minute?" Daniel asked. Lisa looked up, and for just a second, Daniel saw worry flash across her face. He realized she probably thought he was going to criticize something or tell her she was doing things wrong. All those previous nannies must have made her expect that. "It's nothing bad," he said quickly. "I just wanted to say thank you. I've been watching." He paused, realizing how that sounded. "The security cameras. I check them sometimes during the day, just to make sure everything's okay." "That's completely understandable," Lisa said without defensiveness. "If Tommy were my son, I'd want to keep an eye on things too." "The thing is," Daniel continued, "what I've been seeing this week, it's been incredible. The way you are with him, the way you make everything fun and engaging. He's different already. Happier, more confident. Lisa dried her hands on a towel and leaned against the counter. Tommy's an amazing kid, Mr. Carter. He just needs someone to see past his challenges and recognize his potential. He's been shut down a bit, probably from people underestimating him. But he's got so much to offer. Please call me Daniel. He ran a hand through his hair. And you're right. I think I've been guilty of underestimating him too. I got so caught up in managing his condition, making sure he had the best medical care and equipment that I forgot to just let him be a kid. You're doing the best you can, Lisa said gently. Being a single parent is hard enough. Being a single parent to a child with special needs while running a company, I can't even imagine the pressure. They talked for over an hour that night. Daniel found himself opening up in ways he hadn't with anyone in years. He told Lisa about his wife leaving, about the parade of nannies who disappointed him, about his fear that he was failing Tommy despite all his money and resources. Lisa listened without judgment. She shared a bit about herself too, how she'd grown up with a younger brother who had Down syndrome, how watching her parents navigate his care had inspired her to become a nurse, how her brother had passed away when she was 19 and she'd promised herself she'd honor his memory by helping other kids like him. That's why I do this, she said softly. It's not just a job for me. Every child I work with, I see my brother. I see the potential that so many people overlook. I see the joy and personality that's there if you just take the time to look. Daniel felt something shift inside him that night. It was dangerous, this feeling. It felt like hope, and hope had hurt him before. But as he watched Lisa talk about Tommy with such genuine affection, as he thought about his son's laughter echoing through the house again, he couldn't help but let that hope grow. The following week, Daniel found himself checking the cameras more frequently. But his reasons had changed. He wasn't looking for problems or red flags anymore. He was watching because what he saw made him smile. He was witnessing his son come alive again, and he couldn't get enough of it. He saw Lisa teaching Tommy to high-five with better coordination, celebrating every successful connection like it was an Olympic achievement. He saw her helping Tommy practice his speech by singing songs together, her patience endless when he struggled with certain sounds. He saw her sitting with Tommy during his rest times, not on her phone or ignoring him, but actually talking to him about space and planets and all the things he loved. One afternoon, Daniel was supposed to be reviewing a major contract. Instead, he had his phone propped on his desk watching the security feed. Lisa and Tommy were playing with building blocks. Tommy would point to where he wanted a block placed, and Lisa would position it according to his directions. Together, they were building a tower that was impressively tall. Just one more, Tommy said, his face scrunched in concentration.
On top, careful.
Lisa held the final block steady, letting Tommy guide her hand until it was perfectly balanced on the tower's peak. They both held their breath for a moment. The tower wobbled but held. Yes, Tommy shouted, throwing his hands up in triumph. We did it! You did it, Lisa corrected, holding up her hand for their signature high five. You're the architect. I'm just the construction worker following your brilliant design. Tommy's smile could have powered the entire city. Daniel felt his eyes burning again. These moments, these tiny, beautiful moments of his son being happy and confident, were worth more than every dollar in his bank account. And Lisa was the one making them happen. That evening, Daniel made a decision. He came home early again, bearing takeout from Tommy's favorite restaurant. Surprise, he announced, walking through the door. I thought we could all have dinner together. Lisa looked surprised. Oh, I usually leave before dinner. I don't want to intrude on your family time. You're not intruding, Daniel said, and he meant it. Besides, Tommy and I want you to stay. Right, buddy? Yes, Tommy agreed enthusiastically. Miss Lisa has to stay. We're going to tell you about the solar system after dinner. They ate together at the table, the three of them, and it felt natural in a way Daniel hadn't expected. Lisa asked him about his day, and he found himself actually wanting to share, even the boring business parts. Tommy chattered between bites, more talkative than Daniel had heard him in months. After dinner, true to their promise, Tommy and Lisa taught Daniel about the solar system. Lisa had created flashcards with pictures, and Tommy knew facts about every planet. As Daniel sat on the floor with them, learning about Jupiter's moons and Saturn's rings, he realized something startling. This felt like a family. The thought scared him. He'd built such high walls around his heart after his wife left. After all those nannies had disappointed him and Tommy. He'd promised himself he wouldn't trust easily again, wouldn't let anyone get close enough to hurt them. But Lisa was different. She wasn't trying to impress him or manipulate him. She genuinely cared about Tommy, and it showed in every interaction, every patient moment, every creative game she invented to make his son's life better. Daniel looked at his son, at the joy radiating from Tommy's face as he explained why Mars was red. Then he looked at Lisa, who was listening to Tommy with complete attention. Like his 7-year-old explanations were the most fascinating thing she'd ever heard, and Daniel felt that dangerous hope blooming wider in his chest, spreading warmth through places that had been cold for so long. He didn't know where this would lead. He didn't know if he was ready to trust again, to open himself up to the possibility of caring about someone beyond his son. But as he sat there on the floor of his living room, surrounded by planet flashcards and his son's laughter, Daniel decided that maybe, just maybe, it was worth the risk. After all, some things were more valuable than protecting yourself from potential pain. Some things, like watching your child truly thrive, like finding someone who saw the beauty in what others considered broken, were worth being brave for. The cameras would stay on. Daniel wasn't quite ready to let go of that safety net, but perhaps with time, he could learn to trust without constantly looking over his shoulder. Perhaps Lisa could teach him that the same way she was teaching Tommy, that his challenges didn't define his worth. As Lisa said goodbye that evening, promising to see Tommy bright and early the next morning, Daniel stood at the door a moment longer than necessary. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for everything you're doing for him, for us." Lisa smiled, that warm, genuine smile that had first made him want to take a chance on her. "I'm exactly where I want to be, Daniel. See you tomorrow." As he closed the door and heard Tommy calling for him to come see his newest space drawing, Daniel realized that for the first time since his wife had walked out, he was actually looking forward to tomorrow. 3 months had passed since Lisa started working for Daniel, and the house had transformed into a home again. The walls that had once felt cold and empty now echoed with Tommy's laughter. The pristine rooms that Daniel's ex-wife had decorated like a magazine spread were now lived in, with Tommy's artwork taped to the refrigerator and building block creations dotting the coffee table. Daniel found himself coming home earlier and earlier. He'd rearrange meetings, delegate tasks to his very capable team, and leave the office by 5 whenever possible. His business partners had noticed the change, commenting that he seemed different, lighter somehow. Daniel would just smile and change the subject, not ready to explain that he was rushing home, because he didn't want to miss bedtime, stories, or the update on whatever adventure Lisa and Tommy had gone on that day. It was a rainy Tuesday afternoon when something shifted between them all. Daniel had gotten caught in traffic and arrived home just as Lisa was helping Tommy with his physical therapy exercises. But this time was different from what he'd seen on the cameras. Tommy was frustrated, close to tears. His legs weren't cooperating the way he wanted them to, and after weeks of progress, this setback felt devastating to the 7-year-old. "I can't do it," Tommy cried out, his small fist clenched. "I hate this. Why can't I just be normal?" Daniel froze in the doorway, his heart breaking. He'd heard his son express frustration before, but never quite like this. He started to move forward to comfort Tommy, but Lisa caught his eye and gave him a small gesture to wait. She sat down on the floor next to Tommy's mat, not hovering over him or trying to force him to continue. She just sat there quietly for a moment, letting him feel what he was feeling. "You know what?" Lisa said finally, her voice gentle but not pitying. "It's okay to be angry sometimes. It's okay to feel frustrated. This is hard and anyone would feel upset." Tommy sniffled, looking at her with red, watery eyes. "But you're always so patient. You never get mad." "Oh, I get frustrated too," Lisa admitted. "When I was learning to drive, I failed my test 3 times. 3 times. My friends all passed on their first try, and there I was, failing again and again. I felt so stupid." "Really?" Tommy's crying had slowed, curiosity taking over. "Really? And you know what I wanted more than anything? I wanted someone to tell me it was okay to be frustrated, that struggling didn't mean I was broken or wrong. It just meant I was learning something difficult." Lisa reached out and gently touched Tommy's hand. "You're not broken, Tommy. Your body just works differently, and that's okay. Some things are going to be harder for you than they are for other kids. That's not fair, and it's okay to be mad about that." Daniel felt his throat tighten. In all his careful planning and medical consultations, he'd focused so much on helping Tommy overcome his challenges that he'd never really acknowledged how unfair it all was. He'd never given his son permission to just be angry about it. But here's the thing, Lisa continued. Being angry is fine. Giving up isn't. You don't have to do the exercises right now. We can take a break, have a snack, read a book. But we're not giving up, okay? We're just pausing. Tommy nodded slowly. Then, to Daniel's surprise, his son looked right at him. Dad, is it okay if I'm mad sometimes? Daniel quickly entered the room and knelt beside them both. Absolutely. You can be mad, sad, frustrated, whatever you feel. That's all okay. I'm sorry if I made you think it wasn't. Tommy leaned into his father's chest and Daniel wrapped his arms around his son, meeting Lisa's eyes over Tommy's head. She gave him a small, understanding smile, and in that moment, Daniel felt something click into place inside his chest. After Tommy had calmed down and they'd moved on to a different activity, Daniel found himself unable to focus on the work emails piling up on his phone. He kept watching Lisa and Tommy together, seeing them in a new light. She wasn't just an employee doing her job well. She was someone who genuinely understood his son in ways Daniel was still learning. That evening after Tommy was asleep, Daniel did something bold. He asked Lisa if she wanted to stay for coffee. I'm not keeping you from anything, am I? He asked, suddenly nervous. I mean, you probably have plans or someone waiting for you at home. Lisa smiled and shook her head. No plans. Coffee sounds nice. They sat at the kitchen island, steaming mugs between them, and for the first time their conversation wasn't about Tommy's schedule or therapy exercises. They talked about other things, books they'd read, places they wanted to travel, the small moments in life that made everything worthwhile. Can I ask you something? Daniel said, wrapping his hands around his mug. Why do you do this? I mean, I know you told me about your brother, but there are so many other nursing jobs that pay well and are probably less demanding. Why specifically this? Lisa was quiet for a moment, considering. Do you believe that people come into our lives for a reason? I'm not sure, Daniel admitted. I used to believe in things like that. Before everything fell apart. I think some people are meant to connect with certain others, not in a magical way, just in a human way. Lisa looked down at her coffee. When I met Tommy for the first time, when I saw him sitting there so shut down and sad, something in me just knew. This is where I'm supposed to be. This is the child I'm supposed to help. Daniel felt his heart beat faster. And now? After 3 months? Now I'm sure, Lisa said simply. Tommy's progress has been incredible, but it's more than that. He's becoming confident in himself. He's learning that his worth isn't measured by what he can't do, but by who he is. That's the real work, you know? The physical therapy is important, but helping him love himself, that's everything. You've helped me too, Daniel said quietly. Watching you with him, learning from the way you handle things. I'm becoming a better father because of you. Lisa's cheeks flushed slightly. You were always a good father, Daniel. You just needed someone to share the load with. Their eyes met across the counter, and Daniel felt that dangerous hope surge through him again. Stronger this time. This wasn't just gratitude or appreciation for good childcare. This was something deeper, something that both thrilled and terrified him. Over the next few weeks, their evenings together became routine. Daniel would come home, they'd all have dinner as a family, and after Tommy went to bed, Daniel and Lisa would talk. Sometimes for hours. They shared stories about their lives, their fears, their dreams. Daniel learned that Lisa loved old movies and couldn't cook to save her life despite being otherwise incredibly capable. Lisa discovered that Daniel played guitar but hadn't picked it up in years, too consumed by work and worry. One Saturday, Daniel decided to take a day off, a real day off, not just working from home. He wanted to spend it with Tommy, and when he mentioned this plan to Lisa on Friday evening, she smiled and said, "That sounds perfect. You two will have a great time." "Actually," Daniel said, his heart pounding, "I was hoping you might join us, if you want to. I know it's your day off, but Tommy and I were thinking of going to the Science Museum, and he specifically asked if you could come." It wasn't entirely true. Tommy hadn't asked yet because Daniel hadn't mentioned the plan. But he knew his son would be thrilled at the idea. Lisa's face lit up. "I'd love that." The Science Museum trip was one of the best days Daniel had experienced in years. Tommy was in heaven, rolling from exhibit to exhibit in his wheelchair. pointing out facts he knew and asking questions about things he didn't. Lisa pushed his wheelchair while Daniel walked beside them. And to any observer, they must have looked like a normal family out for the day. At the planetarium show, they sat in the dark theater with Tommy between them, watching the stars projected overhead. When Tommy reached out and grabbed both their hands in excitement at seeing Saturn's rings, Daniel felt Lisa's hand accidentally touch his. Neither of them pulled away immediately, and that brief contact sent electricity through Daniel's entire body. After the museum, they got ice cream despite the chilly weather. Tommy got chocolate all over his face and they laughed as they tried to clean him up with napkins. An elderly woman passing by smiled at them and said, "What a beautiful family you have." Daniel opened his mouth to correct her, to explain that Lisa was just Tommy's nanny, but the words died on his lips. Because in that moment, sitting on a bench outside an ice cream shop with his son giggling and Lisa grinning beside him, they did feel like a family. That night after Tommy was asleep, Daniel and Lisa lingered in the hallway outside the boys' room. The house was quiet, peaceful in a way it had never been before Lisa arrived. "Thank you for today," Daniel said softly. "It meant a lot to Tommy and to me." "Thank you for inviting me," Lisa replied. "I had a wonderful time." They stood there close enough that Daniel could smell her shampoo, something light and floral. He wanted to say so many things, that she'd changed their lives, that he looked forward to seeing her every day, that somewhere along the way his feelings had shifted from employer to something much more complicated. But the words felt too big, too risky, so instead he just smiled and said, "Same time Monday morning?" "Wouldn't miss it," Lisa said. And there was something in her eyes that made Daniel wonder if maybe, possibly, she felt something too. The next few weeks were a blur of happiness that Daniel had forgotten could exist. Tommy continued to make remarkable progress. His physical therapist commented that she'd never seen such improvement in such a short time. His speech was clearer, his confidence soaring. He'd even made a friend at his weekly therapy group, a little girl who Tommy proudly announced liked space as much as he did. But it wasn't just Tommy who was changing. Daniel felt himself opening up in ways he'd kept locked down for years. He smiled more. He worried less. He even started playing his guitar again, sometimes in the evenings after Tommy was asleep with Lisa sitting on the couch listening. His family started noticing the changes too. His mother called one evening and commented that he sounded happier than he had in years. His sister visited for lunch on a weekend and met Lisa, who had stopped by with a book she'd promised to lend Tommy. That's when things started to get complicated. After Lisa left, Daniel's sister Rebecca turned to him with a serious expression. "Can we talk?" "Sure," Daniel said, though something in her tone put him on edge. Rebecca sat down at the kitchen table and gestured for him to join her. "I'm worried about you." "Worried?" "I'm better than I've been in years. Tommy's thriving, work is good." "That's exactly what worries me," Rebecca interrupted. "You're getting too attached to this nanny. Both of you are." Daniel felt his defenses rise. "Lisa is incredible with Tommy. She's exactly what he needs." "I'm not saying she's not good at her job," Rebecca said carefully. "But Daniel, you're looking at her the way you used to look at your ex-wife. And Tommy clearly adores her. What happens when she decides to move on? What happens when she gets a better offer or meets someone and wants to start her own family?" "That's not going to happen," Daniel said, but even as he spoke, doubt crept in. "How do you know?" Rebecca pressed. "Look, I know you've been lonely. I know raising Tommy alone has been incredibly hard. But you can't project your desire for a family onto an employee. It's not fair to you, to Tommy, or to her." After Rebecca left, her words haunted Daniel. He tried to push them away, but they kept circling back, especially late at night when he couldn't sleep. Was he being naive? Was he setting himself and Tommy up for another heartbreak? He found himself watching the security cameras again, but this time with different eyes. He noticed Lisa taking a phone call in the other room, speaking quietly. He saw her checking her phone during Tommy's nap time. Normal things that any person would do. But Daniel's old paranoia began whispering ugly thoughts. What if Rebecca was right? What if this was too good to be true? One evening, Daniel came home early and overheard Lisa on the phone in the kitchen. He wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but her words froze him in place. I know, she was saying, but I can't just walk away now. He needs me." There was a pause as the person on the other end spoke. "It's more complicated than that," Lisa continued. "I care about them, a lot. Maybe more than I should." Another pause. "I'll figure it out. I just need more time." Daniel backed away quietly, his heart racing. What did she mean? Who was she talking to? Why did she need more time? That night he reviewed the security footage from the past week with new suspicion. He saw Lisa taking multiple private phone calls. He noticed her typing something on her laptop during Tommy's rest time. He watched her photograph Tommy during one of their activities. The old wounds reopened. The fear and mistrust he'd worked so hard to overcome came flooding back. He remembered his ex-wife's betrayal, the nannies who'd had ulterior motives, all the times he'd been taken advantage of because of his wealth. Daniel barely slept that night. By morning, he'd convinced himself that something wasn't right. Rebecca's warnings echoed in his head, mixing with his own painful memories. He needed answers. He needed to know what Lisa was really doing in his home, with his son, in his life, and he needed to know before his heart got broken again, or worse, before Tommy got hurt. Daniel spent the entire next day at the office, but he couldn't focus on anything. His mind kept replaying Lisa's phone conversation, picking apart every word and searching for hidden meanings. The doubt had taken root, and now it was spreading like poison through all the trust he'd carefully built over the past months. He pulled up the security footage on his computer again, ignoring the concerned looks from his assistant when she brought in his third cup of coffee. He watched Lisa with Tommy, and now everything looked different through the lens of suspicion. When she took photos of Tommy's artwork, was she documenting his progress or gathering material for something else? When she pulled out that notebook she was always writing in, was she recording memories or collecting information? His phone buzzed. A text from Lisa. "Tommy had a great day. He managed to stack 8 blocks by himself. Can't wait to show you when you get home." Daniel stared at the message. It seemed innocent, sweet even. But was it genuine, or was she manipulating him? His ex-wife had been good at seeming genuine too, right up until the day she left. He texted back a simple thumbs up, when normally he would have responded with enthusiasm and questions. He couldn't bring himself to do more. That evening, Daniel came home with his jaw tight and his heart heavy. Tommy greeted him with his usual excitement, wheeling over to show his father the block tower Lisa had helped him preserve on a board so it wouldn't fall. "Dad, look, 8 blocks. That's my record." Daniel forced a smile. "That's great, buddy. Really great." But his eyes were on Lisa, who stood in the doorway looking at him with a slight furrow between her brows. She could tell something was off. During dinner, Daniel was quiet. He picked at his food while Tommy chattered away about his day, with Lisa gently encouraging the boy's storytelling and helping him when he struggled with certain words. It was the same scene they'd shared dozens of times before, but now it felt different. Daniel felt like an outsider looking in, unable to shake the feeling that he was being fooled somehow. After Tommy went to bed, Lisa didn't immediately gather her things to leave like she usually did. Instead, she stood in the living room, arms crossed, looking at Daniel with concern. "Okay, what's wrong?" she asked directly. "Nothing's wrong," Daniel said, but even he could hear how unconvincing it sounded. "Daniel, I've been working with you for 4 months now. I know when something's bothering you. You've barely said 2 words all evening, and you couldn't even look at me during dinner." Her voice was gentle but firm. "Did I do something wrong?" This was his chance. He could ask her directly about the phone call, about what she'd meant when she said things were complicated. But the words stuck in his throat. Instead, something uglier came out. "Why do you take so many photos of Tommy?" Lisa blinked, clearly surprised by the question. "What? And you're always writing in that notebook. What are you writing about?" Understanding slowly dawned on her face, followed by hurt. "Are you serious right now? You think I'm, what exactly? Selling stories about your family? Gathering material for some kind of expose?" "I didn't say that," Daniel said defensively, but his tone said everything. "You didn't have to." Lisa's voice shook slightly. "I can see it in your face. You don't trust me. Can you blame me?" The words burst out before Daniel could stop them. "My ex-wife left us. Half the nannies I hired were only interested in my money. The other half couldn't handle the reality of caring for a child with special needs. I've been burned before, Lisa. Multiple times. So you're judging me based on what other people did to you?" Lisa's eyes were bright with unshed tears now. "After 4 months of me showing up every single day, of caring for Tommy like he's my own. You still see me as just another person who's going to hurt you. I overheard you on the phone, Daniel admitted. Yesterday, you said you couldn't walk away, that things were complicated, that you cared more than you should. What was that about? Lisa stared at him for a long moment. Then she walked over to the coffee table and picked up her backpack. She pulled out a large notebook, the one Daniel had seen her writing in, and held it out to him. Here. Look at it. Daniel took the notebook hesitantly and opened it. What he saw made his chest tighten with shame. Every page was filled with detailed notes about Tommy, but they weren't the kind of notes someone would write for a gossip column or a tell-all book. They were progress reports, observations about what made Tommy laugh, what frustrated him, which teaching methods worked best. There were sketches of adaptive equipment ideas, notes about physical therapy exercises, lists of books Tommy might enjoy based on his interests. But it was more than that. There were also little personal touches, quotes of funny things Tommy had said, drawings Tommy had made that Lisa had carefully taped into the journal, pressed flowers from their walk in the park. In the margins, Lisa had written personal reflections. Tommy tried so hard today. So proud of him. Need to remember he gets overwhelmed when too many people talk at once. His smile could light up the world. Daniel flipped through page after page, each one a testament to how much Lisa cared about his son. This wasn't documentation for profit. This was love, written down in ink and paper. I started keeping that journal the first week I was here. Lisa said quietly. I wanted to track Tommy's progress, but also, I wanted him to have it someday. So when he's older, he can see how hard he worked, how much he accomplished, how amazing he's always been. I was going to give it to him when he graduates high school or maybe college.